take pictures of myself.
Why is this frozen?
Okay?
Ready?
All right, remember, you are fast ASL. Oops. No, I don't want fast.
The purpose of my talk today is to outline the three major trends affecting central cities in the United States. The first trend has been the decentralization of population, and particularly the middle-class population out of the central cities into the suburbs. The second trend is the decentralization or out-movement of manufacturing employment to the suburbs. And a third trend is the substitution of service jobs for manufacturing jobs as our economic base in the central cities. So I will go through each of these points in turn. Although the middle-class population began to decentralize out of the central cities before World War II, the flood of movement didn't occur until after the war ended. The reasons were both due to market forces and government policy. First, an important reason for the decentralization of population was the deteriorating living conditions in our central cities. Traffic congestion, crowded living conditions, and pollution made many city neighborhoods unattractive and unhealthy living environments. Moreover, our environmental laws were lax, and factories were often located next to residential neighborhoods. This further contributed to the push of middle-class families out of the city. In contrast, the suburbs promised cleaner, cooler air and open spaces. While families may have wanted to move out of the city for decades, it was the rising incomes that occurred during and after World War II that made such a move possible. During the war, the economy reached full employment. Men and women alike went to work to support the war effort. Due to wartime rationing, there were few consumer goods and few things for families to spend money on, so their savings accumulated. By the time the war ended, families had savings to spend on housing as well as other consumer goods. From 1940 to 1960, disposable family income increased by more than 50%. Disposable income is the money a household has to spend after they pay their taxes. Families not only had money to spend on housing, but they had income to buy automobiles.
Yes.
Automobile ownership expanded the distance that individuals could live from their place of work, so that automobile ownership meant that a family could live in the suburbs and commute downtown to their place of work. With rising incomes, families also spent money on automobiles. During the war, men and women had delayed marriage and child-rearing due to the war. And so after the war, a rising marriage and birth rate also contributed to the demand for new housing. Aside from rising incomes, rising automobile ownership, and the increase in marriages and birth rates, there were also several federal initiatives that encouraged the middle class to leave the central cities. A first program was the Federal Highway Act. The Federal Highway Act put a tax on gasoline so that every time anyone buys a gallon of gasoline, they pay a tax. That tax was allocated to new road building, so that there was a huge pool of money to build new roads. This meant that our roads expanded rapidly around the cities and between cities. As roads improved, families could live further from their places of work and commute. So road building also made it possible for middle-income families to move out of the cities to the suburbs. Remember during this time that employment was still centered in the central cities, so people were still attached to the central cities. They could live in the suburbs, but they had to come downtown for their jobs. Another federal program that encouraged the out-migration of middle-income families was the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, and VA, Veterans Administration programs. These two programs guaranteed loans that banks would make to homeowners. So for example, if you're a homeowner and you participate in this program and you borrowed money from a bank, if you defaulted on your mortgage, the bank would be paid back by the federal government. This made banks very ready to make loans for mortgages. Also, mortgages were extended to 30 years and often the down payment was only 5%. So this program made a lot of mortgage money available to residents, and it made homeownership extremely affordable. Moreover, it's encouraged moves to the suburbs because it was in the suburbs that you could own a home. In the central cities, you primarily had to rent. In 1950, 57% of the urban population lived in the central cities. So in 1950, more than half of our urban populations were located in the down in the central parts of the city. Today, less than 35% of urban residents live in the central cities. Moreover, the incomes of our central city residents, the average income of central city residents has gone down as middle income.
All right, how did that feel? Oh, was I loving